Well, academics don't feel free to air controversial opinions. That's according to a survey commissioned by the Free Speech Union and carried out by Courier Market Research. And today we speak to the Chief Executive of the Free Speech Union, Jonathon Ayling. Well, with me I have the Chief Executive of the Free Speech Union, Jonathon Ayling. Jonathon, good to have you on McBLOG.
Thanks for having me.
Now, let's just talk about this survey of academics. Firstly, can you just tell us who was surveyed?
So this came from a data set of almost every academic in the country. We didn't reach out to all of them, but we took a random sample from that and have had about 450 academics participate. So we've done this along with Courier Market Research, one of the most well-reputed polling companies in Wellington, and they've helped us with these figures and endorsed the final product. And so it's pretty concerning what we've seen there, given the response we've received.
Okay, and just before we look at the results, pretty good buy-in from academics. You know, you didn't get any resistance or, leaning to one side?
Well, I don't think the academy. I don't think we'd consider universities very unbiased places. So I think it does. The results themselves reveal that there is bias with our university. I'll let you and your listeners decide whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. That's not our role. But no, certainly there is resistance. Quite a few academics would much rather us not be talking about this issue. Ironic, I find that we're one of the only parties in the country talking about academic freedom, that we're there standing up for their right to research without fear or favor. I don't know why they wouldn't want us to do that. But no, there's been considerable resistance and quite a lot of bias.
Yeah, and I mean, based on the results which you're about to tell us, it's quite clear that they are concerned. So tell us, what was your sort of baseline findings?
Well, I mean, across the board, it's fair to say that academic freedom is in poor shape in New Zealand, and that's really concerning. This is the second year that we've done this academic freedom survey, and we are following on in a slightly different format. We changed the survey slightly, so we can't track it exactly, but we can kind of say within CUI, every metric that we have researched has declined from last year to this year, and mostly these are based just off the definition of academic freedom in the Education and Training Act. So not that I think many of your people will spend a lot of time on Twitter, and probably they're better off for it, but if you go on there, you'll see people going, well, isn't this about free speech? Why is the Free Speech Union interested in academic freedom? Academic freedom is a different thing. And fair enough, it is. Academic freedom and free speech are not the same thing. But we've taken the definition of academic freedom within the Education and Training Act 2020, and according to the criteria that it lists, asked academics within their own universities to say how free they feel. And you know what? People may not feel free, but they are free in reality, you know? So this is saying how the academics feel. Yeah. We're not a think tank. We're an employment union. We're an advocacy group. We'll let other people do the big white papers. What we're saying with this report is, are you going to argue it doesn't even appear that there's a problem here? So our basic claim is, where is the Tertiary Education Union? Why aren't they doing this work? Where's the Tertiary Education Commission? Where's the Minister of Education? Where are the Vice Chancellors of the universities whose primary role it would be to create an environment where academics can research and come up with solutions to the many problems that are facing our society? And so that's really our battle cry, is why are we the ones having to do this work? And hopefully we'll get some cut through and see some people go, well, we may not like the way you do it, but we'll look into this ourselves. And fine, do it your own way, but as long as people feel like they are able to contribute to these conversations.
Okay, and you found out that what, about half of academics don't have a sense of freedom, is that right?
So across all those criteria, one of the aspects is the how comfortable they feel to participate in conversations where they would be expressing an unpopular or a controversial view. And if you think about the conversations that these academics are having, the right answer is often unpopular or controversial. You know, if we're challenging assumptions, if we're positing solutions to issues that we haven't solved yet, the likelihood is the generally accepted way of doing it, which isn't cutting it, isn't good enough, and those that counter it, that's going to be an unpopular perspective to put forward. And 44% of academics across the survey said they felt comfortable The rest said that they didn't feel comfortable. So a clear majority, a majority at 5 of the 8 universities of academics did not feel comfortable. And this is really concerning. I mean, I think you and I both agree that our society, our culture is facing really significant challenges. And we need novel approaches. We need open conversations to stimulate really provocative ways of pursuing progress. And if we're left with popular and conventional approaches, they're just not going to cut it. And so I think we should all be concerned by the fact that the university isn't the only body or the only party that we look to provide solutions for our society and culture. But I'm quite okay with them being a key component, individuals who have dedicated their whole lives to studying very specific questions. I would hope that they would have insights into the paths we should pursue forward. And yet, if they are coming from the wrong perspective, if they're wrong think, if they are from the wrong background themselves, and they don't feel free to participate in these conversations, there's a portion of the academy that is saying, well, good, they should feel afraid. We don't want their contribution anyway. And certainly throughout history, at one time or another, there have been parties that have been denied the right to participate in these conversations, to contribute what they have to offer, and we have all been poorer for it. And I would say today, yet again, it is foolish if we think now we can engage in this sort of activity again, but we'll do it properly this time. That's just not the case. To develop these novel solutions, we need everyone at the table.
Okay, now I would assume that in academia and in universities, they would tend to be left-leaning or more left-leaning than right-leaning. And yet these results suggest that even people, left-wing people, left-leaning people are feeling a bit restricted. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Which is interesting.
Absolutely. And so what we were glad to see, a trope which is said about the Free Speech Union, which is easily disavowed, but a trope that is that we're only out there to defend right-wing speech. And Bob, if I may, I think it's important that your listeners understand why that is the case. It's because we are often defending right-wing speech. We won't shy away from that. It is because, for the most part, we are defending conservative speech or more traditional perspectives. And so at a superficial level, if you look at our caseload and you go, well, these guys, they're just right-wing provocateurs, at least call yourself that. I think Chris Trotter and Matt McCartan and Danger Rowe would be surprised if they knew that they were endorsing and standing by such a right-wing provocateur group. The reason is because that's the sort of speech and those are the ideas that are primarily under attack in our society today. And it was interesting, several months ago, we had Professor Nadine Strossen from the United States here, a lifelong advocate for free speech, one of the global leaders across over 50 years defending free speech. She very much comes from the left, and she was the president of the ACLU, quite a left-leaning organization for quite some time. She said, we always face the same accusations, that that because 30 or 40 years ago, the speech that needed to be protected, the ideas that needed to be protected were often more left-leaning, that they were a left-leaning group just because of who they were associated with. It's a very superficial, I would say quite misleading way of trying to look at the claim. Why don't you face us on the claims we're making and counter in that regard? So we were pleased, despite the accusations, which I think are disavowable, that the data clearly shows that it wasn't just right-wing people answering the survey. A major portion of the university, according to other surveys, is left-leaning. This is echoed as well in the media. It's not a conspiracy theory or a trope. A lot of research shows, for better or worse, and I think arguments can be made on both sides, that the media is dominated by left-wing perspectives. The academy is as well, and yet even there, those that were on the left often did not feel comfortable, did not feel free to participate in these conversations. And we broke down into some of those conversations, asked questions around sex and gender, politics, religion, the Treaty of Waitangi and racism, and it was interesting to see the responses as to these subjects. People don't feel at all constrained in criticizing religion, and I would say good. I don't want them to feel afraid to criticize religion. I say, I believe in free speech. I believe in the value it has to let the truth float to the top. And so I'm glad they don't feel constrained in that regard. I'm really glad they don't feel particularly constrained to discuss politics. I think that would be a very troubling space for us to be in if our academy was unable to criticize a government or criticize the opposition, however that may work. And largely, I think they are free. But there's some really important subjects that as a society at the moment we're trying to address, and the data shows many academics do not feel free to engage in these or participate in these. And one of them, for example, is the Treaty of Waitangi. Yep. And so another response to our survey is, well, academic freedom and free speech are not the same thing. An academic who is a professional in engineering shouldn't be commenting on law, and to tell them to sit down and shut up because they're not a lawyer or a legal academic is not infringing on their academic freedom. They need to stay in their lane. I think that can be overzealously applied. It appears sometimes, unless it is the very thing you've been studying for 40 years and it is the only thing you've ever considered, you're the only person who can comment on that. I think we need to take that in leeway, but we don't want mathematics professors commenting on history. But the claim is that the Treaty of Waitangi should impact every feature of the university and many other sectors as well. It's supposed to be all-encompassing. You ask them, well, what part of the public service should the Treaty of Waitangi not touch? And they'll say, no parts. It should touch all of that. It should have implications everywhere. Well, if that is the case in the university, as these organizations are becoming what are called te tiriti-led, it is to be an overarching structure that has implications everywhere, well, then almost every discipline and every faculty will be impacted. There will be implications for those academics. And therefore, it is very much within their lane to say, well, you are claiming, whether rightly or wrongly, again, that's not our problem, that the treaty has a place here. Okay, I'm allowed to have a comment about that now. I'm allowed to engage from my discipline within my expertise on that subject. And a lot of people would rather they kept their mouth shut. And that's the troubling part. As our data shows that, and this won't be a surprise, but look at the statistics. We're not just making this up. Men, particularly white men, particularly older white men on the right, not much of a surprise, feel very constrained in their ability to exercise academic freedom. And for those that are going to operate with any good faith in the university, you can disagree with men or older white men or older white men on the right, and still say, but academic freedom matters, and they're wrong, but they should be allowed to make their case. Yeah. Whereas the response that we receive from a lot of people is, older white men on the right feel like they can't participate in these conversations. Oh, good, because we've had enough of their contribution anyway. They can bugger off. And I would say that's not going to serve us well as a society going forward. Even if all they're doing is highlighting where they're wrong and they are completely in error, at least at that point they are contributing the conversation at what is incorrect. Simply shutting them out has never served any society well.
Now, activist Daphne Whitmore, she wanted to do a public talk at AUT on the subject of feminism, advocacy and free speech. It was a discussion about free speech in the context of transgender, gender-critical feminism debate. AUT said there was a bureaucratic error and cancelled it.
Well, that was their first response. Then we received several other issues as well. We're not exactly sure why the event couldn't go ahead.
So was gender and sexuality one of those forbidden taboo areas in the controversial topics list?
Absolutely. It rated slightly better than the Treaty of Waitangi, but again, about half of academics felt they couldn't engage in this without fear, without constraints on their academic freedom. And I mean, again, I would just like to highlight with Daphne Whitmore and the scenario we had at AUT when we were shut out illegally. Daphne is a Marxist. She's not left-leaning. She's a radical leftist, and she believes she has the intellect and the arguments to back that up. Again, good on her. That's her claim to make. But she's, we've associated closely. She's done a lot of great work with the Free Speech Union, and we're very happy to have her along to make the case for free speech, where different perspectives and different opinions can come together and say we can do far worse than let our enemy speak. And I think that is the essence of the basic claim of free speech, that we will inevitably do far worse than letting the other side speak if we engage in censorship of one kind or another. And so around this issue of gender specifically, sexuality, people felt quite comfortable engaging with, but gender was a different question. Absolutely, this is one of the three primary sacred cows or three primary taboos in our society today. And that's why the Free Speech Union is going to be sponsoring a debate series as we go towards the election. We're going to have quite a large platform to have some international speakers and some local experts come together and hash this out and let the public decide around these issues, because we're not served well. These three taboo subjects, for the most part, that we find that virtually no one feels comfortable engaging with, they won't be a surprise to you at all. Gender, with regards to critical gender perspectives or gender ideology, racism in the context it takes here in New Zealand, Treaty of Waitangi, the role of the treaty, the role of partnership, co-governance, and thirdly is climate change. Not even just some would want there to be a debate around whether climate change exists. I don't think there are that many people that are particularly interested in that debate, but the implications of that assumption that climate change does exist as to whether the government is the best party to approach that issue and the response that is called for in that regard, that's a very important conversation. If this is the existential crisis that many claim it is, we need to be able to talk about then as a society how we bring people on board to address this. And again, I'll let your listeners decide whether it is that existential crisis or not. But I think, unfortunately, in our society, as illustrated across these issues and more broadly as well, we could think of many other examples. Acknowledging that the other side might have something to say, or that even letting the other side might strengthen your case is a very foreign concept to many people. I would love those that I disagree with to reveal their error, and it makes my job a lot easier, because for the most part, I think as people listen and ask good questions, and those are the two prerequisites of free speech, really. It is that free speech presupposes you're listening, and it hopefully includes some provocative, well-crafted questions as well. I don't think as a society we do that well, and certainly this report would indicate, unfortunately, the place that should be doing it the best, the academy, is not doing it well either.
Yeah, and just finally, you mentioned right at the start, why isn't there more leadership from the top, from government, saying that we need academic freedom? There was the Education and Training Freedom of Expression Amendment Bill that was defeated last year, which would have required tertiary educations to protect freedom of expression. It was voted down by Labour, Greens and Te Pāti Māori, which in effect sort of says, well, they're not interested in this space, doesn't it?
Unfortunately, it appears that is probably the case. Look, I would probably disagree with where we would want that leadership to come with, to an extent. For the most part, the Free Speech Union doesn't. The censorship that we see rising, we don't think it comes from governments. On a separate issue that the Free Speech Union is working on, with regards to where we're opposing the disinformation project for some government money that they're looking to acquire. I was being interviewed by this the other day, and they said, "Oh well, with Jacinda Ardern gone, we thought all this would have gone away." And I said, "This is what the Free Speech Union has been saying for years, that censorship and opposition to free speech and the oppression of open debate is not emerging from Parliament. It is emerging from our culture, and Parliament is responding to that. Absolutely, I'm not saying Parliament isn't there isn't a catalyst there, or it isn't being emphasized there. The hate speech laws would have been a horrific oppression of free speech, and that was very political. But it didn't start there. It has many contributing factors. The media, of course, is one. As I'm on with some journalists, they seem to think that it's only the media's fault that we're experiencing these problems. Again, I would say the media plays a role, but it's not being caused by the media. I don't want to simplify it too much, but I would say if it is coming from anywhere, if it is being caused from any one place, it is the university, with more and more of our young people going through this cultural formation process. They're being told what to think in many cases, not how to think. Yeah. Of course, they emerged there thinking very similar things, not been exposed to those who think very differently, and unable to engage in that critical discussion. So certainly the Minister of Education has a role to play, and legislation like the Academic Freedom Bill has a role to play. But I would be far more interested in Vice Chancellors picking up this mantle, and the TEC and the TEU. We worked with Dr. James McDowell on that piece of legislation, not in drafting it, but we were very supportive of it. And it was unfortunate that it didn't really even get to go to the select committee process to have public participation. The Minister of Justice at the time, Chris Farfoy, said that there were other approaches that they were intending on pursuing to address whatever problems might exist. We haven't seen any of those approaches emerge yet. And as I said at the beginning, it appears the survey would indicate that the problem is getting worse, if anything. And that's why, you know, I was talking to one of our staff members the other day, and he said, gosh, where are we going to be in 15 years? And I don't think I need to convince you, Bob. I said, 15 years, forget 15 years. Where are we going to be in 2 years? You know, things start to unravel pretty quickly once entire portions of the population, it appears, and that's overstating it a little bit at the moment, but that's what we're heading towards. Certain portions of the population, by virtue of who they are or by virtue of what they believe, being unable to participate in these conversations. And that's why we constantly insist that free speech is the foundation on which our entire liberal, democratic, human rights structure is based. And I prefer to talk about civil liberties than human rights, because I think it imagines the freedoms that we have been given, not just the rights that we have. I think that's an important distinction. And without free speech, we can not have free thought, and we can't have freedom of conscience. If today I cannot express what I believe, tomorrow I won't believe it. We, as humans, we have a very social way of holding together. Some people have the ability to hold a belief, in isolation and never lose that. But very few people have that. For the most part, we require that communal aspect of giving and taking in terms of how our beliefs are structured. And unless we can discuss that, unless debate is a part of that, unless we are unencumbered by fear to actually express our perspectives, then that freedom will be forfeited very quickly. And that's why whenever I speak with commentators or journalists who insist it's a liberal left versus a conservative right binary, I just find that incredibly simplistic. I think we have to grow bigger than that. Going there, as I've said, there are many on the left, and I think even supporters of the Family First, individuals within the church that sit on the left, I think they can feel quite isolated at times, going, well, I disagree with these subjects, but I do think the government should be involved in more taxation or whatever. Now, look, we can agree or disagree on that, but hopefully we are not going to fail to practice what we preach by shutting out those people. And I think a number of journalists insist that the left is the problem, and so they shouldn't be allowed to participate in the conversation around free speech anymore. If anything, the left has actually defended free speech more than the right historically, and that's not the case anymore. But I hope we're able to be inclusive in that truly tolerant way, and let everyone be part of the conversation there.
Yeah. Oh, well, we do appreciate the work of the Free Speech Union, and stoked to be associated with it in little ways. So, Jonathon, really appreciate your time on McBLOG today.
Thanks a lot, Bob. Cheers.